Good morning. It's Saturday morning, the 23rd. This is a continuation of the video that I made yesterday. Yesterday, I focused on some of the content and commentary of our mayor, Scott James Matheson, some of the things that he said on his conservative talk radio station, Talk 92.1. I mentioned that there's another local conservative radio station that's WVGA 105.9. I think it's called Newstalk uh, WVGA, but it's owned by Black Crow Media. A fellow down in Daytona used to own it, so I'm not sure if he still does or not. But they have the usual suspects too in terms of syndicated people. They have Brian Kilmeade, I believe, Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, Mark Levine, kind of the usual suspects. For the record, just like with the mayor, I've reached out to. They actually had a local talk show called The Morning Drive with Steve Nichols. I've reached out to Steve 4 times at least to try to have a conversation about the content of his shows. I reached out to his guest host as well. Nobody would talk with me. And then I've reached out to the station manager, Kim Pelkowski, and she's not interested in meeting as well. So I also have history with WVGA 105.9. Back in 2009, they had someone else was at the helm of the local talk radio show, which is 3 hours a day, 5 days a week here. This person that I won't name because they still live here, they teach at the university, and they did back when they were on the air here. But they had their version of the morning drive, which was very Rush Limbaugh, and it was fraught with sexism and kind of racial overtones at times, both by callers and by the host. But there was an event that kind of pushed some of us over the edge with them. So I just wanted to make you aware of that and just kind of give you some context. Um, in November of 2009, there was a mass shooting in a local housing project here in Hudson Docket. And this is just a picture of the Valdosta Daily Times coverage of that. 11 people were shot and a 19-year-old was killed, a fellow named Sidney Bivens. He had graduated from high school at Valdosta High, had started remedial classes, and was about to start college at Valdosta State University. So he was doing that while I was there. I bring all that up because we had this mass shooting in a local public housing community. And the person that had the morning drive felt the need to make light of it on air. He made some disparaging comments, and then callers called in, and one person said that it was probably a good thing that this had happened. It was a silver lining because, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said something to the effect that it was going to make room in the housing projects for all the illegal aliens. So the host joked about this, callers joked about this, and many of us had worked in this community. So I went down and I tried to talk to the host. We had a little exchange in the lobby of Black Crow Media. That is the parent company of WVGA. They have, for the record, I think 7 radio stations, and only one of them is a talk radio station, as far as I know. But things got a little loud in the lobby. And I asked management at that time for a copy of the recording of the show. They keep these things for liability reasons and so forth, or a transcript, and they wouldn't give it to me. I told them if they didn't, I would start talking to their sponsors about what was said because it was unacceptable. We did that. Some of the advertisers pulled their dollars. Um, uh, and when that happened, the owner of Black Crow Media came up from Daytona. At least that's who owned it back in the day. I don't know if he still does or not. I met with him. Reverend Floyd Rose was with me when I met with him. And we explained to him that his content, someone that lives somewhere else that has his corporation here, was incredibly troubling and not good for our community. And we asked for airtime to have rebuttals and discussion and dialogue, or at least maybe create a program where you have a liberal and a conservative so people could hear more than one viewpoint. And he wasn't willing to do any of that. He just kind of blew it off. So we continued with reaching out to sponsors and so forth. So I have a bit of a history with WVGA, and I believe Kim Pelkowski was there when all this happened. She remembered some of it. So she's aware of that. Again, I've reached out to her twice now and requested a meeting. She's not willing to do that. So What we're going to do at this point, and you can find the document down in the description of this video, is that there's a spreadsheet that lists some of the local folks that sponsor WVGA Newstalk 105.9. We've begun reaching out to them. We do that respectfully and lovingly, and knowing that people need to make a living. But I think it's a fair question to ask people whether or not the content that's aired on this station, both locally and as well as the commentary of the national pundits like the Rush Limbaughs and so forth, do those things that are often offensive and divisive and inflammatory, do they reflect the values of the businesses that are making that content possible with their ad dollars? On the spreadsheet, you'll find phone numbers for local businesses. You'll also find their Facebook page links. So we've already started reaching out to them and had some really interesting conversations with folks. One of the things we've asked folks to do, if it doesn't reflect their values, is for them to contact the radio station and ask for space and time for actual discussion of some of the things that are said. So I don't want to spend my money at places that support things that are destroying my community. I hope you don't either. So I hope you'll take a look at that sheet and reach out to those folks respectfully, lovingly, and just share your concern if this is something that concerns you. With that said, I wanted to just show you a little bit of the content. And this is, again, just kind of borrowing some stuff over the course of a few shows. This is, as I did on the last one, my legal advisors say this is fair use because I'm not sure it's copyrighted by a Black Crow, but I am using their content in order to offer commentary and criticize it, as well as hopefully educate and make people aware of it. So I just want to acknowledge that. So let me just skip forward a little bit. And I'll explain these clips as I show them to you.
I've got, on any given day, a couple of 100,000, give or take, listeners. I interact with many of them. They'll send me emails. I'll talk to them. There are some that I believe are champions of liberty. There are some that I believe love this country. They're patriots, but they're not you guys.
So I wanted to show you this simply to make you aware that this is a wide girth in terms of the reach of this station. Even Steve here recognizes that he's talking to maybe 200,000 people on any given day. And the two people that he has that he's referring to, I don't have people like you. One was a recurring guest, Joe, and I can't remember his last name. He said some of the most outlandish things I've ever heard, and I'll show you some of those in just a little bit. For the record, I reached out to him through Steve. He wasn't willing to talk with me either. But my point here is that this has a wide reach. Black Crow Media is, reaching several counties in the area. So we'll just continue. Oh, sorry. I skipped ahead.
Why is the media important? Because I got to keep you scared. It doesn't have to be true. I just got to scare the snot out of you.
Is that the Dr. Mark Siegel?
Yep. Tell them what the title of that book is.
False Alarm, the Truth About the Epidemic of Fear.
Because if you're scared, I can get you to do anything I want you to.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I've seen that play out.
So one of the things I stuck this in here, I don't think it's inflammatory or anything, and neither was the earlier clip. But I find it interesting that both Steve and Joe know that propaganda can scare people and you can manipulate people with it. And at the same time, I don't think they realize that they actually have the power to do that with the content on their show. I just think it's a little odd that you recognize that it's easy to scare people, but you have a show that's oftentimes scaring people. We're all kind of guilty of this, right? Have you ever, I don't know how many times I've been in traffic, stuck in traffic and complained about it and had to realize, well, I'm traffic too. So anyway, I just thought it was interesting. I think it also reflects that people are conscious on some level that there's some power that you have in media to scare people. So I wanted to just show you that.
If you're a Glenn Beck listener, you've been hearing him talk about how the radicals, the anarchists, the Marxists, and the Islamists are all coming together to attack the country. Well, in 2004, this book was written.
Unholy Alliance. Yeah.
Yeah, Unholy Alliance, about how the DNC has married itself to radical Islam. If you're a Democrat and you don't like that, tough. This book has a third of it is the footnotes come out of public sources that proves that the Democratic National Committee married itself to Islam for the money. So if you're a Democrat, you are part of radical Islam.
So this is, again, this gentleman said some of the most asinine things I've ever heard. And he's actually the reason I initially reached out to Steve. I saw one of the shows he was on more than once. And he claimed in that show that Antifa was an arm of the Democratic Party. As somebody that knows people in Antifa, and I told Steve that I did because I lived in Portland. They were in classes that I taught because they signed up for them. We had conversations, and for the record, they don't believe in the electoral process. They don't vote. They don't participate in America's voting process. So to have this guy claim, which is basically fear mongering, that Antifa, was an arm of the Democratic Party is just silly. So I told Steve that. I said, let's talk about it, and Steve didn't take me up on that offer. Here, the guy is making other claims. Not only are, Antifa an arm of the Democratic Party, but the Democrats are Islamist. I don't even know what to say about that other than, again, it's kind of fear mongering. It's also kind of Islamophobia, if you would. It's unfair to Muslim Americans, if you think about it. So I just wanted to show it to you.
Folks, this election is literally whether or not you're going to remain some semblance of America or you're going to become a communist nation. Not even socialist, straight up Marxist.
So I've shown this in an earlier video. I just wanted to show it again. One of the current themes, and you saw this in the Senate runoff, is all this red baiting, all this neo-McCarthy language, this kind of red scare tactics of claiming the Democrats are communist or they're socialist. This guy says we're going to be in socialism. And it's either one of two things. You don't clearly understand what socialism is and communism is if you claim that, particularly if you realize the DNC is funded by some of the richest people who are utter capitalists. It makes no sense whatsoever. And for the record, the mayor does this too. He recently on his station said that now that Joe Biden has won, we're in for 4 to 8 years of socialist mire. And that those are his words, that socialism is going to take over. So this kind of demonizing anybody that's not a conservative, as if we're turning into communist China or the Soviet Union or Russia, is just kind of silly and not based on any real facts whatsoever.
Have you been listening to them? Please, if you haven't, take an hour, Google some of the things these people have been saying they're going to do. Robert Reich, he said he's going to have a Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. Folks, that's how they literally put you in the gulag, in the FEMA camp. Mm-hmm. That is exactly what those commissions have done. Historically, that's what they're used for. They did them in South Africa. That's what they used to go around and get back at them for all the people who they blamed for apartheid and everything else. So if you were just some poor farmer off in the middle of nowhere in South Africa, eventually they came and they took your property and they might have just put a tire around your head and burned you because you were the white man. Mm-hmm.
So this one has got layers to it, right? Robert Reich was, I think, Clinton's Secretary of Labor, maybe. He's a liberal. There's plenty of stuff out there that he said. I don't know if he said this or not, but this gentleman, Joe, clearly knows nothing about the Truth and Reconciliation process in South Africa. Desmond Tutu headed that up. There's been truth and reconciliation efforts in Australia. There was kind of one after World War II in Germany. We haven't had one as a nation, but to, again, a fearmonger here, basically, that if this group of people were going to be put in FEMA camps and we're going to be put in the gulag, clearly this man doesn't know his history. Clearly he is fear mongering. And then he kind of twisted at the end to give it a little racial undertone of saying, if they're just killing you because you're the white guy. And Steve doesn't object to it. I think this is one of the things I found disappointing. He just goes, so one of the other things besides the red scare kind of stuff, there's this undertone of racial revenge, if you would. And there's undertones all the time on conservative talk radio here that are kind of racially charged. And I can show you the next example of that.
Well,
I know that the black people are cheating.
you think they're
I was
cheating?
in equipment voting,
Mm-hmm.
and I recognized one of them. I said, I'm on phone with that rascal because I know he's up to no good. So he left equipment and went to Thomasville and voted.
Hmm.
Left Thomasville and went to Colquitt County and voted.
Hmm.
Left Colquitt County and went to Cook County. Then he went to Bath. Then they went to Lowndes County.
Hmm.
So that's how you voting people is getting ripped off.
Mm-mm-mm.
And
Earl, I got to go to a break, but I appreciate the call. Let me know if you caught any fish, okay?
hold on just a minute, Steve. My phone is about to go dead on me.
Well, I got to go to a break, Earl. Have a good day, brother, okay?
Okay, you
All right.
too, bud.
See you,
Good
man.
talk to you again.
All right, good talking to
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye. 105.9 WVGA.
So again, there's layers to this, and Steve seems like a nice guy on most days. I was just disappointed that he didn't push back on this guy. This is the kind of stuff you hear, and this was part of the runoff kind of rhetoric in the last election that tells me that white people are afraid of black people voting and they don't really want them to vote. That's what we do in Georgia as well as throughout the South. As I said, the complexion of the country and the states are changing. Minority groups are growing in size compared to white folks. And so now it's all this discussion of voter fraud. And this guy calls in, Earl, sounds like an older gentleman, and then claims that black folks are cheating. And he tells this tale to Steve that this guy went around to 5 counties and voted 5 times. What I wish Steve would have done, and he didn't, he kind of agrees with him and moves on to a break, and he doesn't return after the break and say anything about it. But I wish he'd have just said, Earl, you're not telling the truth, or Earl, are you kind of sure about this? So you want to tell me you followed this guy through 5 counties and you walked into the building with them and saw them cast a ballot in each of those things? Because I think Earl's kind of concocting this story, but Steve didn't push back at all. And with 200,000 people listening to this potentially, right, many of which probably think what Earl thinks, I think it's important for hosts to again, just challenge callers at times when they make outlandish claims. So, and this thing is problematic on many other levels that this gentleman felt the need, if he actually did this to follow somebody, basically to harass them from afar, stalk them as they went around there and did their business. So I found it really sad that Steve just didn't push back on it. Again, it was one of the many things that I'd love to talk with him about.
The problem on the left, they have no fear of the consequences of their actions. That's why they cheat. That's why they when they have their gatherings, they wear foam vaginas on their head. They spit on people. They defecate in the streets. They do these things because they have no shame. They have no fear of consequences. Their moral fiber is not what mine is.
Right. I completely agree with that. That is 100% true factual statement, and that's why they win.
So I've used this clip before in an earlier video, but I think it's just so troubling. And Steve said this after I reached out to him and identified myself as somebody on the left. So he's talking to me. He's talking to people like me, and he's claiming to have moral superiority over me and people like me. And I just think that's not fair. I am a moral person. And for the record, the people that put foam vaginas on their heads, let's just talk about that for a second. Why'd they do that? Well, thousands of women that could have the means got into the street and did that because a man who bragged about sexually assaulting women, particularly grabbing their vaginas and thinking it was funny, was just elected president of the United States. And so whether you agree with the response to that, folks made those foam vaginas and wool vaginas and wore them in protest to say, look, you know, sexual assault's not acceptable, particularly from someone who's got the most power in the country and then possibly in the world. So let's put that in context. You know, I think if you go back and remember all those thousands of people that peacefully protested back when President Trump won and it was announced, very few of them was spitting on people. I don't remember seeing anybody defecate in the street. So to paint anybody who's not conservative as not of the same moral fiber as you is not fair. It doesn't seem very Christian to me, particularly if you won't talk with me about the claims you're making or talk with people like me about the claims you're making. So again, this is just one of the many things I wanted to talk with Steve about because I found it really disappointing.
They're going to do things to us that's going to be terrible, especially the elderly people. They're going to annihilate them. The ones that do not agree with them, they're going to annihilate them. Now, there's several different ways that they're going to do it, and they'll do whatever means is possible. That's just like if our two senators that we got running Georgia win, they're liable to start killing people. They're going to kill people. They've already killing people now. They're already, injuring people, and they're not going to quit. But the thing of it is they're cowards the way they go about it. But we're not cowards, and they better understand that. And I appreciate the time, and I hope you have a wonderful week again.
Okay, so this gentleman, I've used this clip before, but I think it's important. It's an example of how the public has been kind of made afraid. This gentleman calls in and says that a bunch of people are going to be killed if Loeffler and Perdue don't win the Senate election. For the record, they didn't win, and nobody got killed. As far as I know, there was no, oh, let me take this back. He said if they won, there would be violence and killing. I don't think that's necessarily true, but I hate that this guy is living in this place of fear. Again, the host this particular day, Brad, and I can't remember Brad's last name, but he's the president of the local Georgia Christian school, didn't really push back on this gentleman and say, well, what makes you feel that way? What evidence do you have that makes you think that people are going to hurt us if things don't go the way liberal folks want? But instead, this guy kind of says this on the air, and things just kind of move forward. Just a little bit more, and then I'll stop.
Who you vote for, I don't care, and you shouldn't give a crap who I vote for. You just shouldn't.
No, I give a crap what you're voting for.
Yeah, and I'm not voting for socialism, communism, Marxism. I wouldn't vote for somebody with a D by their name if somebody held a gun to my head. I wouldn't. I know who not to vote for. I can promise you that.
So more kind of red baiting here. I don't know if there was any communist on the ballot. I don't know any communist. I don't know any Marxist. I think this is the other thing I'd like to say. I've taught at 5 universities. I've met one Marxist in all those years, 20 years, and they're a theoretical Marxist. They don't think a revolution's going to happen. They're utterly live capitalistically. They like to make money. But what intrigues them is generally theory that Karl Marx wrote, particularly his critique of capitalism. So the conservative argument that Marxists are taking over campuses and universities is just horseshit. It's just not true. I'm sorry. This kind of argument that communism is going to take over is just not, there's no evidence to it. Now, there is evidence that people want to socialize health care because they don't think getting access to a doctor should be a product that you purchase, that you shouldn't, they think of it as a right instead. So we could have a conversation about certain social services that might get socialized, but we already have some of that. And I've said this before. The post office, if you work for a state institution, if you work for a university, we could talk about the police and fire departments aren't privatized. We don't have Verizon and AT&T fire departments or police departments, and most people I know don't want that. So we already have elements of what you might call socialism in our society. But this argument among conservatives that the socialists are fixing to storm Washington is just ludicrous. And again, something we should talk about.
If Trump doesn't win and win big, they take over. If they take over, you'll never get to vote again. Oh, you'll have to vote, but you're going to vote for comrade I give you forever, because the left has told me we will have one party rule forever. If you're a Democrat, they have told us they are going to make it so there's one party rule forever.
I'm angry because
There's
what's
no
going
common
on?
ground left. The left and the right, there is no common ground left. We have two different visions for America that cannot be coexisting.
No.
So two things here. Again, I don't know who they mean by the left. I am a leftist. I want multiple parties. I think the kind of duopoly of Democrats and Republicans, there's a whole lot, in some ways they're not very different. They're a power elite. So for Joe to claim that the left wants one party, again, is just silly. If he would talk to a leftist, he might find that out. And Joe, if you ever hear this, I hope it gets passed on to you, man, just reach out to me. I'll be glad to chat with you. I think you're utterly inaccurate about a variety of things. And it's clear to me that you're troubled by a variety of things that you believe and see. So I'd love to talk with you about it if you're ever open to that. But last but not least, I put this last clip in because Scott agrees with him when he says there's no room for discussion. There's this line that's drawn. And again, I don't know if Joe identifies as Christian or not, but I do know Scott does. He started his show every morning with a pledge of allegiance and a prayer. So to have Scott agree that the line has been drawn and there's nothing we can do, again, I just want to know, how do you reconcile that with the teachings of Jesus Christ? I mean, I really want to know. So anyway, these are examples of just some of the content I yanked off of WVGA 105.9, Black Crow Media. It's just examples of the fear mongering. It's examples of why we should be talking with one another instead of about one another. I am totally disappointed that the management and the owner historically have not been interested in doing any of that as they capitalize on creating division. I think it needs to stop. And I think the plan needs to be developed that can do that in a way that takes care of everybody, particularly people who are financially dependent on these jobs. But again, if we don't heal the divide, nobody will. We have to do it at the grassroots level with one another. And I put this out there in the spirit of doing that. So again, down below, there'll be a link to some of the sponsors to WVGA Newstalk 105.9. If this troubles you as much as it does me, I hope that you'll reach out to some of those sponsors and share this video with them. Let's have some dialogue about where they spend their ad dollars. Let's have some dialogue about whether the things said on this station and other stations in our community are good for our community, if they're fair to people. Let's have a dialogue about whether they're in line with Christian values that so many people here say they, or who claim they hold. So anyway, with that, I hope you have a great Saturday. Peace and love to you all. And thanks for tuning in. I don't know what else to say, but have a good day.